Sophia stirred beneath the weight of the early morning light, her eyelids heavy with the last traces of dreams that she could not fully recall. The memory of him lingered, Christian's presence, warm and insistent, like a fire pressed gently against her skin. Even now, hours later, it hummed beneath her ribs, an echo she couldn't shake. She sat up, pulling the blanket around her shoulders, and that's when she saw it. A single white feather rested on the window sill, delicate and flawless. It seemed almost to glow in the soft dawn, edges shimmering like sunlight on water. Her first impulse was disbelief. A feather? Here? How? She scanned the room, the small apartment silent except for the faint ticking of the clock. No open windows, no hint of a breeze, nothing that could have carried a bird's feather inside. Yet there it was, resting as though it had been left for her specifically, a quiet message in the mundane. Her fingers hovered over it, unsure whether to touch. When she finally did, the softness startled her, a ghost of weightless warmth that lingered in her palm. Just a feather, she whispered aloud, but even as the words left her lips, they felt hollow, insignificant. Something deep inside her, a place she didn't fully understand, it stirred. The feather was more than a piece of nature. It was a signal, a spark. Her heart quickened with a mixture of curiosity, longing, and the tiniest flicker of fear. She could not yet name it, but she sensed that the small, fragile thing had opened a door, one she would soon have no choice but to walk through. And somewhere, in the quiet corners of the morning, she felt it, the faint brush of a presence, watching, guiding, and waiting. Sophia placed the feather on her nightstand, turning it over in her fingers as though examining it might make it ordinary. It's just a feather, that's all. She repeated the phrase quietly, almost a mantra, trying to convince herself. But as she moved through her apartment, her mind kept returning to it. The soft down seemed to linger at the edges of her awareness, like a whisper she couldn't ignore. Every logical explanation fell short. No bird had flown inside, no window had been open, no draft could have carried it this far. She shook her head, pacing the small room. I'm imagining it. I've been dreaming too much. He's gone. This is just my mind playing tricks on me. Yet the moment she said the words out loud, a strange tension tightened in her chest. Her breath caught, a faint echo of the warmth she had felt in her dreams of him. A flutter of unease crept in. Was this denial really protecting her, or was it keeping her from seeing something important? Sophia glanced at the mirror across the room. For a split second, she thought she saw movement in the reflection, a flicker of light, almost like a shadow leaning close. Her heart skipped, and she turned sharply, only to find that the room was empty. She tried to laugh it off, forcing herself into the comfort of reason. Mirrors play tricks. I just need sleep. This is all normal. But even as she returned to the feather on her nightstand, she felt a pull, a quiet insistence, as though it were more than just a feather, more than coincidence. Something inside her whispered that the universe was speaking, whether she understood it yet or not. Sophia sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the small white plume. Maybe it is just a feather, she told herself again, and yet for the first time in days, a small spark of wonder flickered in her chest. Maybe. Maybe she was being invited to see. The next few days, Sophia tried to move on, to ignore the feather, to bury herself in routines of work and errands. Yet the world seemed to shift around her as if attuned to some invisible rhythm she had only just begun to notice. It started small. On her walk through the park, a feather caught her eye, glinting in the morning light, resting at the base of a tree. She bent down, picking it up carefully, feeling the same strange warmth that had stirred in her bedroom. 2 feathers in 2 days. Coincidence? Her mind argued, but a seed of doubt had been planted. Later, in a quiet cafe, she opened a book she hadn't read in months. A verse leaped from the page, words resonating in a way that startled her. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. The timing was uncanny, exactly when she had been wrestling with her fear of the unknown, exactly when her heart had ached for guidance. Even the geometry of the world seemed to speak to her now. On a walk home, she noticed the spiral of a snail shell at the edge of the path, the pattern echoing something she glimpsed in a dream. A wave of recognition rippled through her chest as if her soul recognized an ancient language she had only just begun to hear. Sophia's mind whirled between skepticism and wonder. It's all random. I'm just seeing what I want to see. And yet, the repetition, the feathers, the verses, the spirals, could not be ignored. Something persistent, deliberate, and unseen was trying to reach her. By the end of the week, she began keeping a small notebook, jotted down the signs, dates, times, locations, and the strange feelings that accompanied each encounter. Patterns emerged slowly, like constellations forming in a night sky. She didn't yet understand the meaning, but she could feel the invisible thread weaving through her life, pulling her closer to something greater, something luminous. And in those quiet moments, staring at the growing collection of feathers, notes, and sketches, Sophia allowed herself a whisper of possibility. Maybe this isn't random. Maybe I am meant to see this. Sophia's notebook had become a small archive of the strange, persistent signs around her. Feathers, verses, spirals, reflections, all catalogued with careful notes, dates, and her immediate reactions. But simply observing them was no longer enough. She needed to understand. That evening, she pored over books she had long ignored, spiritual guides, dream interpretations, and even obscure text on symbolism. The feathers, she discovered, were often messengers, signs of guidance, protection, or connection to a higher presence. Each time one appeared, it was said to carry an unspoken message meant for the heart, not the mind. The mirrors intrigued her even more. Legends and folklore described them as thresholds, windows between worlds, or reflections of the self one could not see in the ordinary course of life. Sophia thought back to the flicker she had seen days earlier, a movement that didn't belong. Was it a message? Was it a warning? Sacred geometry became her next obsession. She sketched spirals, triangles, and interlocking circles, marveling at the perfection and balance in every line. She read about the ways these shapes appeared in nature, architecture, even in the human body. Each curve and angle felt intentional, almost like a language designed to communicate directly with the soul. Finally, the scripture verses she stumbled upon in books and her daily readings began to take on a new dimension. They seemed to speak not just to general truths, but to her very life, her struggles, and her longing. Each word resonated with her internal rhythm, like a secret code written for her alone. Hours passed in a blur as she cross-referenced symbols, feathers, spirals, and verses, trying to weave meaning from the fragments that she had gathered. The more she studied, the more she realized the signs were not random. They were persistent, layered, and deeply personal. They were calling her to pay attention, to awaken, and to step into a world that had always been there but not been invisible to her until now. Sophia leaned back in her chair, exhausted but alive with something new, understanding. Not complete understanding, nothing so simple, but the first thread of clarity. She realized that the universe was speaking in symbols and that the key to hearing it lay within her own heart. The signs were invitations, and she was beginning to learn the language. A small smile curved her lips. Maybe I am ready to listen. Even as Sophia's notebook filled with patterns and meanings, a shadow tugged at her mind. The signs were compelling, almost impossible to ignore, but they unsettled her in ways she hadn't anticipated. She sat at her desk, fingers tracing the edges of a feather she had found that morning. The soft down felt like warmth pressed against her palm, and yet a cold hesitation lingered in her chest. Am I losing touch with reality? Am I reading too much into coincidences? The rational part of her mind demanded answers, explanations she could control, but the other part, her intuition, her heart, insisted that there was truth here, a depth that she could not yet name. The mirror in her apartment reflected more than her face now. Sometimes she caught flashes of light, strange angles, or the faint impression of a presence. Her pulse quickened and a low tension settled in her stomach. Am I imagining things? Or is this real? Fear pricked at the edges of her awareness, whispering that surrender could be dangerous. And yet, even as fear lingered, longing tugged stronger. She remembered the warmth of Christian's presence in her dreams, the quiet certainty that had followed her in the night. She thought of the feathers, the spirals, the verses that seemed to speak directly to her soul. I want to trust it. I want to follow. But the rational mind resisted. She felt torn, pulled in two directions. The comfort of logic and the pull of something unseen. Her heart burned with desire to understand, to reach out, to respond to the signs. Her mind screamed caution. Hours passed in restless reflection, and Sophia's hands twitched over the notebook, hovering between writing and closing it shut. Finally, with a slow, deliberate exhale, she whispered to herself, "The signs are here, and they want me to see. Maybe I just have to take the first step and trust." The tension did not dissolve entirely. It would linger, but a new resolve took root. Fear and longing could coexist. Logic could pause. And in that delicate balance, Sophia felt the first true sense of her awakening, that she could step forward, even without certainty, into the language of the universe. Sophia could no longer wait for signs to find her. If the universe was speaking, she had to meet it halfway. The next morning, she sat up, a small ritual of attention. A notebook lay open on her desk, ready to capture feathers, reflection spirals, and verses for the day. She placed a single feather beside it, a quiet anchor for focus. With a deep inhale, she allowed herself to sit in stillness, feeling the faint hum of presence in the room. She began to watch mirrors differently now. No longer just reflections of herself, they became thresholds for observation. Sometimes when she gazed into them, a flicker of light would catch the corner of her vision, or a shifting shadow would seem to hint at an unseen truth. She made notes, sketches, and reflections, careful to record every detail without judgment. Her walks became exercises in awareness. She noticed spirals in the leaves, circles in puddles, even geometric patterns and cracks of the pavement. Each shape felt intentional, like the universe was leaving breadcrumbs she had only just learned to follow. She photographed them, sketched them, cataloged the way they made her feel. Sophia even began approaching scripture and poetry with new attention. Verses she had read countless times now spoke with piercing clarity, addressing her fears, her longing, and the restless ache for connection. She copied them into her notebook, circling words that resonated and writing down the emotions that they stirred. Even the feathers, ever present and mysterious, became part of a dialogue. She began to leave tiny offerings in return, a thought, a whispered word of gratitude, a silent acknowledgement of the message carried in their delicate softness. By the end of the day, her notebook was filled with sketches, observation verses, and reflections. A map of the signs was emerging, not of answers yet, but of a language she could begin to understand. For the first time, Sophia felt like this, like a passive observer and more like an active participant, walking deliberately along the path the universe had illuminated for her. A quiet thrill rose within her chest. She did not yet fully understand the meanings, but she had begun to see the patterns, and in that seeing, she felt closer to Christian's flame than ever before, even across the distance that separated them. Days of careful observation and journaling began to bear quiet fruit. The universe, it seemed, was responding to her attention. One afternoon, she walked through the park, notebook in hand, when she spotted a feather perfectly balanced atop a low branch. It was small and almost fragile, yet it trembled slightly in the breeze. As if acknowledging her presence, Sophia bent to pick it up, and in that instant a line of scripture from her notebook came to mind. "You are never alone. I am with you always." And she shivered, struck by how precisely the timing aligned with her wandering thoughts. Later that evening, she sat before her mirror, sketching the spiral she had found earlier in the leaves and puddles. A fleeting shimmer caught her eye, a flash of light dancing along the surface, as if tracing the shapes she had drawn. She blinked, half expecting it to vanish, but it lingered just long enough to feel deliberate. A silent, unmistakable confirmation that she was on the right path. Even in mundane moments, signs appeared. A stray feather on her desk, a verse in a book opened by chance, a pattern in the cracks of the sidewalk. Each occurrence seemed minor in isolation, yet together they formed a rhythm that she could not ignore. With each small revelation, her hesitation eased. Her journal, once a collection of questions and doubts, now reflected glimpses of clarity. She could feel the flame of connection, faint yet undeniable, guiding her steps. Christian's presence, though unseen in the physical world, seemed closer than ever, whispering in the language of symbols. By nightfall, Sophia felt a subtle shift within herself. The fear and doubt that had disappeared entirely, but a growing sense of trust and wonder had begun to take root. She realized that these signs were not just messages, they were invitations, guiding her toward a deeper understanding of herself and the universe and the flame that burned between her and Christian. As she closed her notebook and placed a feather atop it, she whispered softly, almost to herself, "I see you, I hear you, and I am ready to follow." Sophia sat on the edge of her bed, her notebook open and scattered with sketches, verses, and feathers collected over the past week. The quiet hum of her apartment seemed charged with something unseen, a presence that pulsed gently around her, waiting for acknowledgement. She traced the edge of the feather with her fingertip, thinking of the mirrored reflections, the spirals and leaves and shells, and the lines of scriptures that had leaped from books and walls with uncanny timing. Each sign, she realized, was not just a fleeting coincidence. They were threads weaving together a tapestry that connected her, Christian, and something larger than either of them. The fear she had felt earlier had not vanished, but it was no longer held dominion over her. Instead, she felt a fragile confidence take root. The universe had a language, and she was beginning to learn it. Signs were not answers, but invitations to see, to feel, and to trust. Sophia wrote one final note in her notebook before closing it. "I see you, I hear you, I am ready to follow." Her hands lingered on the page, a small prayer and a promise. She knew she would not understand everything yet. The symbols would continue to appear, some clear, some enigmatic, guiding her, testing her, awakening her. As she placed the notebook on her nightstand, she glanced once more at the window where the first feather had appeared. A faint breeze stirred, rustling the curtains, and she felt, rather than saw, a presence beside her. Christian's flame, distant but real, nudged her forward, reminding her that the journey was only beginning. For the first time in days, Sophia closed her eyes without longing or despair. She simply breathed, feeling the quiet pulse of life, the subtle rhythm of the universe, and the warmth of a flame that would not be extinguished. The signs were no longer mysteries to fear, they were guides, and she had begun to follow them.